Hi, I'm Wells Hanley, and welcome to this bonus episode of I Wrote This Song For You. In this special episode, I'll be sharing a conversation that I had with Sophie, whose story and song were featured in episode 1 of this podcast. In episode 1, Sophie and I discussed her love affair with Dan, who she met unexpectedly late in life, and who turned out to be the love of her life, though their love affair spanned only 7 months in total. I also shared the song I wrote for Sophie, Indian Summer. If you haven't listened to episode 1 yet, please consider doing that before listening to this bonus episode. The conversation that follows will make a lot more sense if you do. I have gotten so many more emails than I expected about your story and about how it's impacted people. And a lot of people saying, I want to get to know Sophie. I want to hang out with Sophie. I want to be her friend. And so that gave me the idea to do this Q&A. So I put out the word on Patreon and on my social media pages, and I got some really interesting questions. So We'll just jump in.
Sure, absolutely.
The first question I want to ask is actually a question that I have before we get into the listeners' questions. What I'm curious to know is, what's it been like for you to share your love story so publicly? And has it changed the way that you hold your story at all?
Oh my gosh, I can answer that, Wells. I can so answer that. Mm-hmm. Dan's love was so much a gift. It came to me with so much tenderness and greatness, unexpected, mystical. It was like the longing and the wish of your heart when you're 10 years old and you're making a wish and you're sure that the fairies are going to grant it. So Dan's love came to me with that mystical, magical, almost Disney-like quality to it. So that asks to be told, that asks to be remembered. So by having our love story out there, wrapped in the way that you told it, which is so true, I mean, the aching and the loss and the suffering, the joy, the longing, the way that it was sung with this power, it has that feeling that I feel like the love is forever. Mm-hmm. And you writing the song and making the podcast makes that forever a reality.
Here's a question from Molly, and she asks, what do you think Dan would have had to say about the podcast and the song?
Okay. Let me take my time. That's a worthy question of deep consideration.
Sure.
Okay. First of all, right off the bat, I can almost feel Dan here. I can almost feel him sort of inside my heart. And there's this feeling of course, Sophie, this is right. This is what I would want. This is what I wanted to do for you anyway. This is my line of work, live history recordings, and I promised I would record you. And I left too soon. And now Wells is doing it for me. The song, it's everything I love about you. I hear it now. It tethers me in a good way to the beauty of overall and to love that we had. Better than I could have done, Dan would say. Better than I could have done, but what I would have wanted to do. I think that's Dan's view.
Could you say more about Dan's line of work?
He was a writer. He worked at the Washington Post for a good chunk of his career. He was a newspaper man himself, establishing 3 or 4 newspapers on his own. He was an editor, a researcher, and a writer. He published a book. He also pursued music because he got his start in radio, and he never moved too far away from radio. And then, in addition to that, he started a program with the Smithsonian Institute where he interviewed the movers and shakers of both the computer phenomena that was taking place in the 70s all the way through 2000, the key people like Steve Jobs, and also in medicine. So he set up an archival interview video program. It's amazing that we're having this conversation.
It's fitting that we would be archiving your love story with him. And like you said, he wanted to interview you, right? And bring stories of your life forward.
He asked me over and over again, he said, "Oh, I have all this equipment, just, let's do it. Let's get your life story down." And I'd say, "Okay, Dan, okay, yeah, sure, sometime, but we'll do that later. We'll do it in the winter."
Mm-hmm. Right. And even when I met him and was talking to him about his career, I had no idea that I would be interviewing people, like as a host of a podcast. That was like the furthest thing from my mind. Yeah. If I'd known, I would have definitely been picking his brain about it.
Yeah, he was such a great storyteller himself, and a master at teasing out the story that touches the heartstrings of all people, the connecting story, like a good reporter is going to. Mm-hmm. So yes, it's fitting. It's a continuance. Life goes on. I'm going to quote your song. I mean, that's a piece of that.
And it's so interesting that, I'm continuing, I'm making all of these episodes, but the genesis of the podcast really was what happened inside of me when I found out that he'd passed. And this urge to document that feeling in a song and to share it with you, which then led to, this podcast. So it really is very interesting how that all has transpired.
What's the chance of that happening in ordinary life? We know each other, but you met Dan casually a few times. You would have caught a whiff, but you felt something, you kept moving it through. Mm-hmm. It's that little golden thread, you didn't let go of it. Mm-hmm. And this is what happened. I think Dan was actually spinning some straw into gold and giving you a thread.
I certainly don't rule that out.
How's that?
Yeah, I like that.
But yeah. I never feel like he's far away. Mm-hmm. I never feel like he's far away at all. Mm-hmm. Now, as soon as we leave this physical body, we're not restricted in linear time and space. We can be everywhere. Mm-hmm. So, why not be here and everywhere else you're supposed to be?
Right. Yeah. Here's a question from Linda, and she's zeroing in on a particular part of the story. What did you feel were the most important things to say to each other when you realized that Dan was not going to get better?
So many. With Dan and I, and the severity of Dan's condition, what we said to each other over and over is, "I love you. I love you. I'll always love you." But that actually was said more often in action, in where I was. He was in an ICU bed. And I rearranged the whole room. I was right by his side. I stayed there. The staff allowed me to be there, except for a few hours to sleep. So my physical presence was speaking more loudly than words. There's wires everywhere. I mean, there's wires and tubes and machines everywhere, but there's still a place where I could get my hand, touch his body. So it was touch and presence, physical presence, that said more than anything that I would say with words. And for me, it was really, I treated every single day like it was our first date. Every time I walked into that hospital room, I looked as beautiful as I could. Even if I was going to cry off all my mascara, it didn't matter. I wanted to be that beautiful reflection of life for him, so he could hold on to something. Could hold on to something. And that communicated that same feeling of, a first date. Wow, yes. I've got everything to live for. And I brought that in purposefully and intentionally.
Wow.
And I turned away from nothing. I turned away from nothing, no matter how difficult it got to be. That was the other part too. Through thick or thin, through hell that you go through in ICU, I wasn't going away.
So whatever needed to be said, you found a way of saying it without words.
Yeah, the words would have just gotten lost in the noise and the machines. It was the physicality of it. Yeah, the physicality of it.
This next question comes from Tina, and she wants to know, what does it feel like to have a song that was written for you and about you?
It's a feeling of exuberance and joy. Now it feels like that. Mm-hmm. But it's been a process. Because what your song did for me, Wells, is that I had this precious gift. And at that early time, I couldn't even speak the grief to myself. And it was hard to even remember the love, because the first days, the first months of death, it is a black pit. It is shattering. Life just goes, it's like a hurricane. Everything is mixed up and crazy. So your song, I had your song, and I could go to the people that I loved and trusted one by one, and I could say, here's a song, let's listen together. And that's what I did with individual people. We listened together, we cried and cried and cried together. And then we talked about it and talked about it and talked about it together. And then it got a little further, because then it wasn't someone I could sit with, but it was someone I would send it to, and they would listen, and then we'd make a phone conversation. And again, they would cry, and I'd cry. So the song was instrumental, very instrumental, in me building my heart back together and keeping the love, recognizing the grief. Mm-hmm. And then, you were telling me people are listening to this story, then the epicness of the love that Dan and I shared, became immortal. I have a picture of Dan and I on a mountaintop, and it's one of my favorite pictures of the two of us together. And he, in some of his writings, he just had this little word that he wrote forever, and I clipped it out and I pasted it underneath the photograph in his handwriting. There's the two of us on top of the mountain, forever. That's what the song feels like to me. And that's what it's done for me.
Wow, that's beautiful. This one's from Richard, and he asks, does it make you angry that something so wonderful was taken from you so quickly? Or are you thankful to have had that relationship at all? Or both?
How about that and 700 more?
So both and, yeah.
There is no end. It's like you can take a thesaurus, what's a thesaurus? 800 pages of words, and just, smash the book against the wall or rip out the pages and eat them. That is how much you feel that I have felt. The body is screaming its own language, and then the brain has its own set of whys and whens and whats and how comes. And so all of these sources that we have within our physical self are having a response. And those are all me. Those are all me. And yet there's something else that's even greater than that. So it's like holding all of the mind and the body response and then stretching to the greater eternalness of life and the eternalness of my love with Dan. Not losing sight of that for very long. You're going to lose sight periodically, but you get back to it.
Yeah.
Again, I want to say the song told the whole story. So when I would get lost in the moment of where I was, it would seem so dark, the song would remind me. The words of the song would speak to my mind. The music was the language of my body. So I played it. I could not only play it many times, but it was in my head. It was in my head, so that it gave me a ladder I could cling to. And it created a field for me to know that the storm was going to quiet down.
That's beautiful.
So I can say that it's almost exactly, it's getting really close to 2 years since Dan died.
Yeah.
So I can breathe, but God, I still miss him. Oh my God.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. One thing I feel like saying, and it's not really a question, but just the common thread in all of the emails that I've gotten, and even in like the way these questions are being asked, people are somehow bolstered by your strength. And I don't know if you feel a sense of your strength, but something in the way that you've come through this and spoken about it. Like the theme of the emails is that your story gives people hope. I mean, you don't really have to comment, but I just want to say it on behalf of the listeners who've gotten in touch, that your strength in facing this situation has bolstered them in some way.
We often think of strength as being sort of isolated and powerful and maybe a little detached. Right? So I think my story and your song is strength when we're connected and we're malleable and we're receiving. It's a different message of strength.
I'd like to ask you one more question. This one is from Martha, and she asks, now that you've experienced an Indian summer in love, do you hope it might happen again?
I saw that twinkle in your eye.
Or would that make it less special?
Oh gosh, in life, man, I'll tell you what, one thing I cannot do is predict the future. or even predict myself.
That's a great answer.
I have learned that. So, and I also, my gosh, being alive and being able to love in all the many ways that it comes to me, and being aware that love is around me everywhere. It doesn't have to be in a lover's relationship, in a sexual relationship. It doesn't need to be sexualized. It's really great when it is. but love is somebody bringing you a cup of coffee.
Yeah, love is it comes in so many different ways.
Yeah, so I'm more, the love cells of my body are way more open now. They are like open and lapping in the moments of love. So,
I've definitely been in conversations with men around your age who say, "That's Sophie. She sounds like a real interesting lady." And I guess this is my question: should I be giving them your phone number? Probably not. But I have had that conversation. I have had that conversation multiple times with, eligible bachelors who are like, she sounds so interesting.
You know that it was 10 years from the time Charlie died till the time I met Dan. 10 years I did not date.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because I didn't have a great big huge circle of people around me.
Yeah.
I follow an internal GPS that's hooked out there somewhere to a really wide vision. And when that GPS system in a dream said, there's a man for you, when that hooked on my GPS, I didn't know this, Dan was walking the AT right above my house.
What?
Isn't that crazy?
When you had that dream?
When I had that dream, I looked up, he keeps a hiking journal. When I had that dream, Dan was on the AT right up above my house.
Wow.
Does that give you cold chills?
It absolutely did. How'd you know?
Because it gives me cold chills.
That's amazing.
There's that GPS. So, when somebody feels it, you have to take steps. It doesn't happen magically. You have to take, we have human bodies and human minds and human intuition and human impulse. So we need to act on those. So, for instance, if I'm moved, if I feel this in this inner sense, I'm not going to shy away from it.
Right.
I'm not going to cut myself off from that wonderful guide that connects me to life and life and life. So, and each person is responsible. You might be a receiver, you might be a connector.
Right.
If we're supposed to be a connector, we better be on our job.
So I should give them your phone number.
You have to go to your inner GPS and see if that's the right thing to do.
I don't think it is.
See? You got to wait for your own little buzz.
Yeah, that's right.
So.
That's right. Well, I mean, you sort of just answered it, but the final question I wanted to ask you is one that I got asked a lot in a number of different ways. Can you talk about how you knew to listen to that dream above all of the varying voices in yourself and your environment that might be pushing you in all these varying directions? It seems that you had this dream and you had this clarity that this is the impulse that you need to act on. And I think a lot of people are curious about, how do you know how to do that?
I started paying attention to my dreams when I was quite young. Just paying attention to them. And then as I got in my mid-years, I actually started studying dream work. in being able to parse through dream language, symbolic language, and gain a skill in being able to read that, just like we can read an ordinary life. When you follow your dreams for a long time, you learn your own language. You learn your own images. Now, no one needs to do this as long as I did, but anyone that pays attention to their dreams for a while will see repeating figures. There's an energy field around those repeating figures or situations. It's a buzz, it's a frequency. And then you know which dreams are the big dreams, So it comes with work. And I guess here, I just want to encourage people, encourage everyone. There's lots of ways we can gain skill in going through life. And one that we have a tendency to not want to pay attention to is that wonderful intelligence that is wide awake and alert in living color when we're asleep. It's a beautiful, wonderful part of our human beingness. So why shut off that TV? Why shut that off? See what it has to say. Takes some discipline. It takes some study. But you don't have to do anything complicated. Get a couple of dream books, talk to some people, do a little research, and oh my gosh, they have guided me through my life. I have dared to go in places I would have loathed to step a foot on the path because of my dreams. And they have brought me into resplendent places that never would have been available to me through any other avenue.
Well, and online dating was one of those places. You would never have signed up for online dating.
Not in 25 million trillion years. And if I hadn't had my dream figure over there, knowing that I would have to turn around and look him in the eye and say I was too scared.
Right.
I was too scared. I didn't even try. I couldn't have borne that inside myself. I was going to try. And, how else was that guy who was walking up there in the AT when I was having this dream? How else were we going to get connected? Even if he fell off the mountain and he fell down there at the bottom of the creek and he landed, I don't think I would have got it. So this was the way.
Yeah. Well, Sophie, thank you so much for doing this, for answering these questions. I know that the listeners are going to really appreciate hearing what you have to say.
Thank them for asking the questions. I love you all. Dan loves you. Dan loves you even more than I do because he has right now the greater capacity to love. He's not restricted. Amazing. He's not restricted in any way.
That's right. That's amazing. Thank you to those listeners who sent in questions for today's episode. You can hear Sophie's complete story and the song that I wrote for her in episode 1 of this podcast entitled Indian Summer for Sophie. If you like bonus content like this episode, please consider signing up to become a member of the I Wrote This Song For You community on Patreon. You can do that simply by clicking the link Be a Patron in the show notes to this episode or on my website, iwrotethissongforyou.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.